I called my boyfriend a disgusting pig for knowing so much about his sister's bodies, and he kicked me out of his house. We had been dating for a year. He has 3 younger siblings that he takes care of since he escaped from home because his parents were abusive alcoholics. When he was 18, he got custody of all of them. He is a hard-working guy, and from what I've seen, neither he nor his siblings have ever lacked anything. They have everything they need, and as far as I know, they have never gone to bed hungry because of him. One of the reasons I fell in love with him was because of his protective side, especially with his siblings. I won't go into all the details of how they organize themselves, but when I say he takes care of everything, he takes care of everything. From grocery shopping to helping with homework, he does it all. He's been like a father and mother at the same time, and he even finished his studies. The youngest brother even calls him dad. Their parents are the definition of a total disaster. To this day, they don't even know if they're still alive, and they have no other family. It's just the 4 of them, the only ones left in the whole family. But before I start, I'd like to invite you to see part 2 and the finale on my Anna Reddit channel. The link is also in the profile. Last night I slept at his house, and this morning, around 6, his 12-year-old sister came into the kitchen crying inconsolably. She had woken up with blood in her underwear and was very scared. She had gotten her period for the first time. My boyfriend managed to calm her down and explain to her that everything was fine, that it was something normal, and that nothing was wrong. He gave her a quick explanation of what was happening and told her that her body was changing. Then he asked her to take a shower to clean herself and explained where the pads that his older sister, the 16-year-old, used were, and to use them as she had taught her. When the girl went to take a shower, he let out, "Damn, I thought we still had another year left." I don't know if you've ever felt how a word can open a crack in something that seemed indestructible. I lived it. That morning I said, "Disgusting pig," and I saw how his eyes suddenly went out. He didn't shout. He didn't insult me. He just looked at me as if I had wielded a knife and stabbed him in the stomach. Then, with a coldness I had never known in him, he said, "Get out." I was still wearing the t-shirt I had slept in, and I couldn't even put my shoes on properly. I half collected my purse, trembling, and left his house with my dignity in tatters. I didn't know it would be the last time I would set foot there. At first, I told myself that he had overreacted, that he was sensitive about his sister, that he needed space. But hours passed and then days, and I didn't receive a message or a call. He blocked everything. WhatsApp, Instagram, even the email disappeared from my life, as if I were a threat. I kept telling myself that I didn't mean it, that it was an impulse, that I made a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a word. It was a betrayal. I accused him, even if it was for 1 second, of something unforgivable. And he knew it. And his siblings, too. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was trying to concentrate on work in a life insurance office in Malaga, a colleague, Antonio, the only one who knew everything, approached me and said in a low voice, "Your guy has asked for a leave of absence. He said he needed time." Time? Why? Is he okay? I asked without thinking. But I already knew the answer. I don't know. He seemed broken, as if everything had come crashing down on him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked at the ceiling and thought about how it all started, about how much I admired Marcos, about everything he had done for his siblings, how he prepared their breakfast, how he took them to the doctor, how he went out of his way to make sure they had what he never had. I fell in love with his way of caring, and I attacked him right where it hurt the most. On Friday, someone left a bag of food in front of my door. Inside was a note. It just said, "Don't come back." It was his handwriting. I collapsed on the floor. I cried so much that my chest hurt. I felt like an intruder in my own life, a shadow. I tried to help secretly. I used a secondary account to place a large order at the grocery store in the area where they lived, paid with my card. I sent school supplies. I left a gift card in the mailbox. I didn't know if they were receiving it or throwing it in the trash. I didn't care. I just wanted to do something. Anything. Until one afternoon, sitting on a bench in front of the Maria Zambrano station, with my hands frozen from the wind, I received an audio message from an unknown number. It was Lucia, the 16-year-old sister. Her voice was firm, but it hurt a lot. "You have no idea what you've caused here. You didn't just break his heart, but all of ours. We thought you were different. We thought we could trust you." The audio ended with a silence so long that it made me feel as if I had been buried alive. 2 days passed, then 3. I resigned myself. I thought that was the end. Until suddenly, Monday morning, while I was signing a contract at the office, someone came in without asking permission. It was Lucia. She was wearing a black coat, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, a look that did not allow for discussion. She held my gaze without blinking. "Do you want to fix this?" she asked. I could barely nod. "Then shut up and come with me." "Don't say a word." I followed her without thinking. We hurried down the stairs. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. We got into a car. She started driving without saying where we were going. She just looked in the rearview mirror and murmured, "I hope you don't regret it because what you're going to see is going to change you forever." Lucia didn't say anything else after that. She just fixed her eyes on the road, with her hands firmly on the wheel and her jaw clenched, as if she were holding herself back from throwing me out of the moving car. Her silence hurt, and so did mine. The journey seemed longer than it was. Every corner she turned increased the weight in my chest. I wanted to ask where we were going. I wanted to know exactly what awaited me. But the truth is that I had already learned that with Lucia, you don't insist. When she wants to talk, she talks. When she doesn't, the silence screams louder than any word. 20 minutes later, we stopped in front of a simple building with a discreet sign: Association, Light of Life, Shelter, and Hope. Before I could ask anything, she was already out of the car. I forced myself to get out too. My steps wavered like those of a child about to be scolded. And deep down, that's exactly how I felt. We entered. The atmosphere was clean, welcoming. The smell was of fresh bread and tempera paint. There were children's drawings stuck on the walls, toys organized in transparent boxes, a small mural with photos, smiles, birthdays, days in the park, and in many of them, him, Marcos. Marcos smiling while holding a baby in his arms. Marcos reading a story to a group of attentive-eyed children. Marcos teaching a child to tie his shoelaces. Marcos painting a face on any Saturday. Marcos being all that which one day I thought I knew, but now I saw with him. He wasn't pretending to be good. He was good. "He's in the back," said Lucia. Finally, with the new kids. I followed her without questioning, with my stomach churning. We walked down a narrow hallway to an open area at the back with some wooden tables, scattered papers, and children's voices mixing. And there he was, sitting on the floor with 3 boys, helping one of them make a paper airplane. His hair a little longer, his beard unshaven, but the same firm and kind look as always. I froze at the door. Lucia did not call me over. She simply crossed her arms and stood there, by my side, observing her brother. "He comes here every Saturday and Sunday. Even exhausted, even with siblings to take care of. Even with a broken heart," she said without looking at me. "And you know what's the worst part? He doesn't blame you. He blames himself for having trusted." Those words tore me apart more than any scream could have done. One of the children pulled at Marcos's t-shirt, pointing at me. He turned his face, and for a second our gazes crossed. It was like receiving a dry slap to the soul. His eyes, which used to welcome me, now passed over me as if I wasn't there. No anger, no pain, nothing. Just absence. He got up calmly, thanked the children, and went in through the side without even glancing over. And there, in that instant, I understood. There was no greater punishment than the silence of someone who loved you. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to scream, kneel, ask for forgiveness in every way. But my legs did not obey. Lucia was still there, with her arms crossed like a sentinel. "Did you want to understand? Right? Did you want to fix it? Well, start here. He's not going to listen to you yet, but you can see with your own eyes what you trampled on." And I stayed. I stayed until the last child left. I stayed sweeping the floor, folding paper, stacking books. I stayed without knowing if one day I would be forgiven. I stayed because now I knew it wasn't about being forgiven. It was about one day deserving to be able to look at him without being ashamed. And so it was that I stayed. The following Saturday, I returned. Not because someone invited me, or because I thought I would be well received, but because for the first time in my life, I understood what emotional responsibility was, and I knew that running away would just be one more mistake. I arrived early. I helped organize the painting materials. I washed the plastic cups with the sour smell of Friday's juice. I aligned the chairs in the reading room. Nobody said thank you. Nobody looked me in the eye. And it was okay. I wasn't there to receive. Marcos arrived last, as always, with a bag of provisions in one hand, a homemade cake in the other. The children ran towards him as if he were the real-life Santa Claus. And he, smiling, responded to everyone with an affection that hurt to see. It hurt because I remembered that smile, and I knew that for me, now it no longer existed. When he saw me, he hesitated for half a second. only half. And then he simply passed by me as if I were the doorframe. I stayed in my corner. Lucia, on the other hand, shot me sharp glances. It was as if she was there just to make sure I didn't forget for even a second what I had done. And the truth is that I needed that. It was weeks like that. Without contact, without a word, without even a trace of attention from Marcos or the siblings. Even the youngest, who used to hug me when he saw me, started hiding his face behind Marcos's arm. The silence skinned me inside, but I kept going. I swept the floor, cooked rice, told stories, packaged donations, never to draw attention, just to do. It was my way of speaking, since my voice had lost the right to be heard. It was on an ordinary Wednesday when it happened. I had gone to the center to help restock some donations that were disorganized in the storeroom. I was alone in the small room at the back, hearing only the muffled noise of the children playing in the yard when I heard the door open forcefully. It was him, Marcos. He came in as if the world was falling on his shoulders. He threw the boxes in the corner, leaned against the wall, and for a moment he didn't seem to notice that I was there. His breathing was out of sync. His eyes were tearful, he was trembling. "They're cutting off the electricity again," he murmured, more to himself than to me. I didn't move. I can't pretend everything is fine anymore, Lucia. I can't. They see me as a superhero, but I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying. It was then that he saw me and his face fell apart. "Ah," he whispered, taking a step back. "Of course you." I tried to say something, but the words betrayed me. "If you've come to see the damage up close, you've seen it. Now you can leave." He turned around, but before he could leave, I finally managed to speak. "I came because I understood that I hurt you in the worst possible place. I'm not here for me. I'm here for you all. And because you deserve someone to stay, even if you don't want to. Because you always stayed for everyone." He didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. The silence between us was now different, no longer one of repulsion, but of two strangers trying to relearn how to breathe each other in. Lucia appeared at the door shortly after. She observed the scene with the same firm gaze. "He doesn't need forgiveness. He needs peace. If you're going to take that away from him too, you'd better leave now." I just nodded and stayed more than ever, because now I saw that he was broken inside and yet still trying to keep everyone else whole. And that made me love him more than I ever had. And maybe that's why it hurt so much. When he called me to talk, it wasn't a warm invitation or a friendly gesture. It was just a note left in the donations cupboard with his "Today after dinner, back room." My heart almost jumped out of my mouth when I read it. My hands sweated, my throat dried up. I waited all day with a tight stomach. When the clock struck 7 p.m., I was already sitting in the empty room, waiting, not knowing what to say or if I would even have the right to say anything. He entered unhurriedly, closed the door carefully, and remained standing, leaning against the wall, looking at me. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was no tenderness either, only tiredness. A tiredness that came from the soul. "You wanted to talk? Now you have the opportunity. But after this, we continue with the rules of discretion, respect, and distance," he said firmly. "I don't even know where to start," I confessed, huddled in that chair, feeling small. "Then start from the most honest point," he replied. "Why did you call me a pig?" The air disappeared from my lungs. I didn't think. It was instinctive, it was idiotic, it was cruel, and it was unforgivable. I was scared by the situation, by the blood, by the responsibility, and instead of reacting with empathy, I attacked. "Attacked?" he repeated with a bitter half-smile. "And it wasn't just me, it was everything I am." He took 2 steps closer. "Do you know what it means to be called a disgusting pig while you're helping your 12-year-old sister who woke up crying because she thought she was dying? Do you know what it's like to spend your entire life hearing that you're useless, a monster, garbage, and after years of fighting to rebuild yourself? To hear that from someone you love?" I cried silently, but he didn't stop. "I'm not a father. Legally, I'm nothing. But it was me who cleaned up every vomit, who cried silently in the bathroom while doing accounts to see if there would be enough to buy rice. It was me who knelt in the bathroom with her that morning. And you soiled everything with a word." He sat in the chair across from mine, his gaze still firm, but with cracked edges. "I didn't hate you. I can't. But I feared you. I was afraid that if you were capable of seeing me like that in such a fragile moment, maybe you've always seen me that way. As a strange, indecent man who cares too much, who gets too involved, who isn't normal." "No," I finally choked out. No, Marcos. I never saw you like that. Never. That was fear, yes, but not of you. It was fear of my own inability to measure up to everything you carry. I felt small, useless, and instead of owning up to that, I attacked you. I destroyed what you protected most, your honor. He lowered his eyes for a moment. And that's why I'm here. Because you recognized that. He said quietly. I'm not here to forgive you. I still can't. But I'm here to listen. Because even broken, I still believe that people change. And sometimes the one who hurts can also repair. Not in the way they want, but in the way they can. In that instant, I knew. He hadn't opened the door. He had just unlocked a crack. It was the beginning. The first crack in that wall of pain that I myself had helped to build. I left that room with a wet face, trembling legs, but with a heart a little more whole. He listened to me. And for the first time since everything, I felt that maybe one day I could be forgiven. It was the following week when the center coordinator appeared with the proposal. A state event on youth and family reconstruction focusing on real stories. They wanted Marcos to be one of the speakers. They wanted to hear the story of the brother who became a father. The man who rebuilt a family from scratch, without support, without a manual, without rest. He refused immediately. I'm not an example for anyone, he said, throwing the floor cloth in the bucket. I just did what I needed to, and I still make a lot of mistakes. But Lucia, with the firmness she inherited from him, was clear. That's precisely why, Marcos. Because you're not a propaganda character. You're real. And the world needs to hear real stories. We need them to know that you exist. He hesitated. In the days that followed, I saw the conflict on his face between the desire to hide and the impulse to protect what he had built. I didn't say anything. I just stayed close. I offered help with the slides, with the structure of the talk, with the review of the points. He accepted reluctantly, but he accepted. I was still a shadow on the margin, but a present and silent shadow. The day of the event, the tension was visible. The room was full of educators, social workers, students. There was a table on the stage, a microphone, a huge screen at the back with his name, Marcos Sanz, the strength of one who chose to stay. He went up on stage with slow steps. Simple shirt, hair pulled back, timid applause. He took a deep breath, grabbed the microphone, opened the first sentence, and froze. Literally. He went mute. His eyes roamed the audience without focus. His hands were trembling, his throat closed. The coordinator, sitting in the front row, leaned forward in concern. The tension spread like smoke. I didn't think, I just stood up. Excuse me, I said with a trembling voice but firm enough. I went up on stage under the confused gaze of everyone, including him. I gently took the microphone from Marcos's hand, but not to replace him, to protect him. Excuse the interruption. I know I'm not who you came to listen to, but if you allow me, I want to talk about this man here. He tried to protest, but I had already begun. My name is, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I lived with this man, and I saw with my own eyes, making the impossible seem routine. He didn't raise siblings. He raised strong, aware, upright human beings. He created the kind of family that many who were born into structured families could never build. The audience went silent. I've seen him wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare lunchboxes. I've seen him spend the night helping with homework. I've seen him do 3 different jobs so that dignity would never be lacking in the house where he lived. I've seen him console a crying sister who didn't understand what it was to be a woman, and he did it with more respect, care, and love than many mothers out there. My voice failed, but I continued. I know he doesn't feel up to this stage, but maybe because men like him have never been called to be here. He doesn't have a pedagogy diploma or a psychology course, but he had the courage to create a home in the midst of chaos. And that is pure heroism. The applause began to resound slowly, then louder. Some people stood up. I turned to him and saw the small, contained smile. But there it was. The first since the day everything collapsed. He took the microphone back, with wet eyes. Thank you, he said, pausing for long seconds, for seeing me. And then he spoke. He told his story, without ornaments, without drama, just truth. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry out of guilt. I cried with pride, and it was from there that things began to change. Not with hugs, not with apologies, not with any kind of dramatic declaration. They changed in the way that real things change. Little by little, in silence, at the pace of someone who has already lost too much to risk again. In the week following the talk, I arrived at the center and Marcos was already there. He was preparing orange juice in the kitchen, as he always did. When he saw me, he didn't look away. "There's more fruit in the fridge if you want to help." That was it. The first crack of coexistence without tension. I began to go to families' homes to help with social worker visits. We would leave donations together, fill out forms, and occasionally he would even make a dry comment about my disastrous way with documents. I pretended to be offended, he pretended to believe me. Over time, the siblings began to give in too. The youngest, who used to hide his face, started greeting me with a subdued, "Hello!" Lucia was still tough. She always was. But one day, seeing me cleaning paint off the floor after art class, "You just missed a corner there," and she handed me a cloth. It may seem small, but I almost cried. I began to be part of the conversations, of the contained laughter, of the shared glances, no longer as a girlfriend. No longer as someone who belonged to that home, but as someone who chose to remain out of respect, even after the ruin. And Marcos? Marcos no longer avoided being alone with me. Sometimes we talked about the children, other times about nothing. There was a night when we sat on the terrace of the center, watching the little siblings playing with flashlights in the dark. We didn't talk for half an hour, but he offered me a blanket when the wind got colder. And that said more than any, "I forgive you." There was never a conversation about getting back together. There was never a kiss, a gesture of possession, or even a hint. Because loving sometimes isn't about reconquering. It's about respecting boundaries. It's about accepting what's left and making a new beginning out of it. Today, months later, we're still like this. He continues to take care of the world with the strength of someone who has already been ignored by it. And I continue by his side, not as someone who expects something, but as someone who truly understood what love is. Because true love is when you don't ask to be loved back. It's just being whole, present, rebuilt, without demanding anything more than the opportunity to do the right thing. And I grab that opportunity every day, with both hands and with my heart, which finally learned that repentance is only worth it when it comes with action. And the silence, the same silence that once destroyed me, is today the space where, slowly, we are learning to begin again. Days before that farewell, something happened that may have been the real turning point between us. It was an ordinary night. The children had gone to bed early. The center was quiet and I was washing the dishes unhurriedly, trying not to make noise. Marcos suddenly appeared in the kitchen, holding 2 cups of tea. He left one near me without saying anything and leaned against the doorframe, watching. "Lucia told me that you slept on the sidewalk of the hospital when Miguel was admitted," I commented, breaking the silence. He nodded, looking at some fixed point beyond the window. "I had no money for the bus. Sleeping there was better than going home." Silence. We never talked about that. Did we? About what it was like before? About everything? I continued cautiously. "There's not much to talk about," he replied, taking a sip of tea. "It was a war. Only nobody called it a war. They called it home." I turned to him, hoping he would say more. And to my surprise, he did. Once, when I was about 10 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of bottles breaking. I hid under the kitchen table and stayed there for hours. My parents were hitting each other, hurting each other, screaming. My mother said she'd rather die than continue living with us. And my father said she was only alive because no one bothered to kill her. The words came out firm, but his eyes were distant. I remember that night I promised myself that no one else would live what I lived, that my siblings would fear the dark because of bad movies, not because of what they heard at home, that they would wake up to the smell of coffee and not vomit, that they would grow up knowing what it is to be loved, even if it was just by me. Just by me, I approached with almost reverent care. I didn't say anything, just sat in the chair next to him and waited. When you said that word, it was as if my mother had come back, you know? That look, that dirty accusation. For a moment I didn't see you, I saw her. And I panicked inside. I swallowed. Marcos, I have no words that can erase that. But if I could give my silence, my listening, my presence as a request for forgiveness every day, I would do it for the rest of my life. He looked at me, this time for real. "I don't know if I'm going to be able to forgive you. I really don't know, but I don't feel anger anymore, and that's already a lot." I nodded with a lump in my throat. It's everything to me. And in that instant, we weren't ex-lovers, or victims of a poorly told story. We were just two survivors of different versions of abandonment, trying, in the way we could, to build something from the pieces. Not everything that breaks becomes trash. Sometimes it becomes shelter. The following week was lighter. There was something in the air, not a declared joy, but a less tense stillness. As if everyone around was breathing a little better. As if the siblings, the children at the center, and even I had finally found a rhythm. On Friday, Lucia sent me a text. Saturday 3 p.m. chocolate cake and blue balloons. Don't be late. I read and reread, trying to understand if that was what it seemed to be. It was Miguel's birthday, the youngest, the smart Alec, the same one who spent months without looking at me, without even accepting a candy from my hand. I arrived early, as always. I helped with the decorations, cut the napkins, organized the juices. But this time there was something different. No one asked me to do it. I was simply included. The children were euphoric, running with colorful hats. Lucia organized everything with her military efficiency disguised as coldness. Marcos took care of the improvised barbecue, laughing at something a volunteer said. And I just observed, trying to absorb every detail. When they called everyone to sing happy birthday, I sat in a corner. It was his party, his family, and I still didn't know if I was part of that. It was then that Miguel saw me. He stopped in the middle of the circle, and with the naturalness that only a child can have, he pointed at me and said, "You stay here too. You always help inflate the balloons." I got up slowly, not knowing where to put my hands. When I got close to the cake, Marcos took a step to the side. He created space, small but clear. We sang happy birthday together. It came out off-key, animated, sincere. And me there, among them, almost feeling part of it again. When they started distributing the portions of cake, Lucia came in my direction. For a moment, I thought she was going to ask me to give something to someone. But no. She extended a plate with a generous portion. "No nuts. I know you don't like them," she said without looking at me. It was just that. And it was everything. I sat on the same bench as before, in the corner of the garden, savoring that cake with more care than any dessert in my life. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Marcos came and sat next to me. "How was work this week?" he asked with his eyes fixed on the children. I smiled. "Exhausting. The insurance company changed the system and no one knows how to use it yet. It's like teaching a horse to use a spreadsheet." He laughed. A short, discreet laugh, but real. "You'll manage. You always learn, even if it's by force." We talked for 20 minutes, about things like traffic, natural juice recipes, the last movie he saw with his siblings. Nothing about the past, no mention of the mistake, no jab. Just two adults sitting on a bench at a community center exchanging words like planting seeds. Without haste, without guarantee of harvest, but with the certainty that the soil was now less arid. And I understood. Peace doesn't enter with a speech. It slips through the cracks. And that day, for the first time, the window was ajar. 2 weeks after that party, Marcos called me to talk. It was after a quiet late afternoon, with the children painting posters and Lucia cleaning brushes, with a face that said she didn't hate me so much anymore. We sat in the dining room, just the two of us. He didn't beat around the bush. They called me yesterday. An NGO from another city. Fixed job, contract, big house with structure for children, free psychological support for the siblings, decent salary, and peace. The word was suspended in the air. Peace. "It sounds great," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, but it's far away." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. He just kept looking at me, as if waiting for me to react in some way. So I took a deep breath, looked into those eyes I knew so well, and simply said, "Go." He raised an eyebrow. Just like that, without a speech, without attachment, I replied, smiling slightly. "You don't owe me anything, Marcos. If that place is a little lighter than here, you've waited too long to have that for even a second." I saw something break in him, but it wasn't anger. It was fear. "I don't want to seem ungrateful. You've helped so much." "I didn't help so that you would remember me," I interrupted. "I helped because it was the right thing to do, and because even if we never do anything again, I will always want to see you well. Is that all?" "It's enough." In the following days, I was actively part of the process. I organized the children's documents, checked the enrollment in the new school, printed copies of certified IDs, arranged exams, delivered notebooks, washed the dirtiest sneakers. Lucia, on the last day, hugged me without warning, without words. A short but tight hug. Miguel gave me a drawing with colored pencils. Me, him, one giant cake. He wrote, "Thank you for always staying close," with crooked but firm letters. And then came the morning. The van was parked in front of the center, with the luggage already stored. Marcos was talking to the driver while the siblings ran around, nervous and excited. I was at the door with a box in my arms. The last documents, the last snacks, the last recommendations. He came towards me slowly. "Will you stay?" I nodded. "Someone has to keep the paperwork in order and teach the next volunteer not to fry the rice." He laughed for real. We stayed silent for a while. The morning breeze was gentle, almost sad. "Thank you for having stayed, even when you couldn't stay with me," he said, with his eyes fixed on mine. I smiled. A tear fell, but it wasn't of pain. It was of relief. "Thank you for having let me go, even when you could have hated me." He touched my shoulder, squeezed it gently, and got into the van. I stood there until the car turned the corner and disappeared. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't throw myself on the ground. I just breathed. Because sometimes the greatest form of love is not fighting to stay together. It's helping who you love to leave lightly. And when I turned to go in, I saw the children's mural in the hallway. Among the photos, one of Marcos, Miguel, and Lucia with a handmade sign that said, "Choosing to stay is the most beautiful part of love." And I chose to stay whole, rebuilt, at peace. Did you like the story? Leave in the comments what you thought. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and see you in the next video.